Thank you all for showing up today. Thank you to Deborah and Stephanie and the event space, B&H, for having me here. It's nice to be here. My name's Thomas. I'll give you a little bit of a background, my background. I was a working commercial photographer. I've been an exhibiting photographer. I used to have representation in New York and LA. I had some work that was reviewed in the New Yorker once. That was kind of nirvana for me in the fine art world, and it was quite nice. I teach at Parsons School of Design. I'm an author. The book that was just mentioned, The Fashion Image, is by Bloomsbury Publishing in London. If you're interested in commercial photography, there's a chapter on conceptualizing your work. There's the creative team, the client's team, the editor's team, fashion designer's team. There's a lot of great information in there. It's 80,000 words, about 200 images. Just came out last week. So, and the first time actually I've seen them. So this is pretty exciting for me. I'm also an editor at large for IRK magazine. It's a small French fashion and culture magazine. We're print twice a year and we're online. And what else can I tell you? So in a gallery in Chelsea, Thomas Werner Gallery on West 26th Street for 10 years. I do a lot of work. I've done work with the United Nations Alliance of Civilizations. I'm a teacher at their Education First summer school. And with some students from Parsons, we put together a media and literacy site a few years ago for UNESCO and the United Nations in French, Russian, Spanish, English, and French. So a bunch of different stuff. I've been working in the fine arts for quite some time, and I am happy to answer all of your questions that I can, and hopefully I'll give you some good information today. What we're going to talk about is fine art as a marketplace, and I think that's really important because the fine art market is made up of a series of marketplaces. It isn't a hierarchy like most people think. There are the museums and galleries and other places, but there are also art fairs and other ways for you to sell your work. The point is for you to put your work in the place that you will be most successful, right? And everybody has different goals, right? How many people want somebody to like their work? Yeah? All right. Fair enough. How many people want to make a little money? You guys are consistent. How many people want a museum quality level career? Okay? All right. No, that's fair. You should say yes. If that's what you want, that's what you should say yes, right? But each of those things has something a little different to it, right? And there are different things you're going to need to do with your work to achieve each of those goals. I think that's important. You know, some people want to add revenues to their work. Some people want their friends to like their work. Some people, you know, just want to create. And all of those are valid things. I think it's important to remember, though, that, and we're just going to have a few pictures, and then you're going to have to listen, and take notes. Ansel Adams. We all love Uncle Ansel. He's amazing, right? But for the majority of Ansel Adams' career, he couldn't sell his work. Nobody wanted to buy it, right? The fine art marketplace didn't exist until the late 80s, early 90s. So you could buy, if you went to Yosemite, an Ansel Adams print in the souvenir shop for $100 a print, handmade. If you'd had the good taste and the good fortune and bought a few, you probably wouldn't be standing here. Neither would I, right? You would have made a great investment. You'd have extraordinary work. But I think it's important. Ansel sold his body of work for $1 million. I believe it was in the late 90s, and was roundly chastised by the other photographers for selling out, because his fine art work, you shouldn't monetize your fine artwork like that. It's yours, it's personal, right? It's a way of thinking of fine art in a way that's very different. So things have changed, right? We had some of the first exhibitions in museums of photography not that long ago. Certainly there was one in the 40s, the Family of Man, or late 50s, but as we move forward, there weren't actually a lot of photo exhibitions that you saw in museums. Avedon was one of the first people to show fashion here at the Met and then at MoMA. So a lot of the work that you make that's considered fine art now certainly wasn't until the recent past. And the marketplace wasn't developed for you to sell your work in because people didn't think photography was art. They just didn't, despite how hard it was to make. So what is the contemporary marketplace like? On one hand, they like new ideas or new things, right? And everybody says, you know, everything's been done. What am I going to do that's new? Everything's been done. So I want you to think about something. Early on, August Sander, German photographer, 4x5, 8x10, he photographed people who lived on the fringe. These were people who were considered at that point the edge of society, right? And he brought out his camera and he photographed people very still, and he photographed working class people, right? And you can see the effect of the 4x5, and you can see the effect of the way he photographed. There's a lot of respect there, but it's very formal. And these weren't the kind of people who were normally paying for pictures or could afford to do pictures at that time. This was kind of a everyday people, right? So not the usual subject matter. Well, then 35 millimeter came around, right? And everybody said, oh, 35 millimeter, that's not as good as 4x5. That's not as good as medium format. You can't shoot in 35. Well, Larry Clark took that and he began to photograph his friends in Tulsa, Arizona. So he created a book called Tulsa, and he created a book called Teenage Lust. And he used the ability to work in 35 and got close and personal, right? So he photographed people who might have been considered on the edge of society or the fringe of society, not the people usually photographed. And he brought something new to it, right? Technology is one of the things that allowed him to do that, right? But his personal relationships and his way of seeing his friends was another thing he brought. Same subject matter, different way of seeing, right? And I think it's important that you think about that and realize that. A lot of it's reinterpreting what's been done or bringing your own perspective to it. Then Nan Golden worked on the Lower East Side, and she photographed people who were at that point considered on the fringe of society, people who weren't as mainstreamed as others. She used what's called the snapshot aesthetic because people felt it looked like a snapshot. But I really want you, whenever you look at Nan's photos, they're extraordinarily well, they're very formal. They're certainly well put together, right? They're very formal in their composition. These aren't snapshots in the way that you might take pictures on a trip, but they had an aesthetic that was different and a feel that was different. So she looked at the same idea, but brought something new to it, right? So it's the same thing, but bringing something new to the concept. And I think that's really important because everything maybe has been done, but probably not. Technology allows you new things. Camera phones and other things that you all have allow you different kind of access than people had before, and you can bring a new perspective to other things. Right? Now, much to your chagrin, the pictures are done and you have to listen to me talk. There's a lot of information. So, and we can shut this off if it's distracting because I know people look. So concept is one thing. The idea, right? The idea that you use is one thing that the contemporary world values. People value the idea, the concept, and the context, the place in which your idea exists. So let's say I work at B&H and I live 8 blocks or 20 blocks away. Let's make it 20 blocks. And every day I walk to work. And every day I walk to work, I photograph every piece of garbage I see, which is daunting, but I photograph every piece of garbage I see along the way. And at some point, New York Magazine says, oh my gosh, that's amazing. We want to do a story on the rising issue of trash in the city. And they want to use a couple of my pictures, and maybe they'll give me $125 each to use those pictures. And that's great. So I'm in New York Magazine, I get 125 or 250 bucks. My pictures are run. And that's how they function in that context. Well, maybe as I'm walking through, I begin to look at, I'm walking through different neighborhoods of different wealth, so different socioeconomic levels of people, right? So now I'm not only photographing garbage, but I'm also looking at ideas of consumption and disposability across the socioeconomic level context of Manhattan. Now it's getting a little more interesting. Maybe I walk through 2 or 3 different ethnic neighborhoods. So now that garbage is a study of consumption and disposability across different socioeconomic contexts and multiple ethnic groups in Manhattan. That concept has value. So now we have that garbage, and maybe that garbage is interesting because it's about something else. So I take those prints and I go to a gallery and they're like, oh my gosh, that's a great concept. I love the idea. You know, and we love the idea that you're going to blow this garbage up, and okay, great. We'll put them on our wall and we'll sell them for $1,200 each, right? Why? Because there's a context, and it's a different concept in a different context. Same picture in a different place has a different value, and you're going to find that throughout our talk today, right? Concept and context, where it's located and what the idea is. I had a student who, she wanted to photograph her garbage every month. And she photographed it, every week. We hung a camera from the ceiling and medium format, and we taped off a square, and every week she would lay out all her garbage and photograph it, and she was like groundbreaking at that point, and she was published in a number of places, and her work was exhibited, right? Because it was the idea of a young woman her age in Manhattan, and what kind of things do young people consume and dispose of. It was quite interesting, right? So, different concepts. Let's say on one level, one place you can sell your work are art fairs, right? And by art fairs, I don't mean the Armory. I realize I have to clarify that in New York. Because when I say sell your work at an art fair, everyone thinks you're going to be at the Armory. Or you set up a booth and you go through and you flip through the bins, right? And that's your work. You can sell your work at art fairs. Now, is there anything wrong with that? Not at all. My friend Todd, he was working, it was quite a few years ago, he said, I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to spend my time in Southeast Asia. I'm going to photograph indigenous tribes, and I'm going to sell the prints to people in the Midwest. Right? I was like, good luck, you can sleep on my sofa, because that's a tough one. And he did. He quit his job. He got this old van. He bought a booth, and he started out. And we made all these prints, and we made all these choices we were sure were going to sell, and they didn't right away. He kept going back. And he got to the point over the course of a few years where he was doing a series of art fairs that made sense to him, making between $100,000 and $130,000 a year. He would sell his work every summer. He would travel every winter. He lived in Wisconsin. That's where I grew up. He bought a church. He renovated the back half. And they lived in the front. The back half was his studio, his work area. And in the end, he had an Airstream and a motorcycle and a truck. So he would drive the truck in. They would set up. He could frame and mount in the back. They'd live in the Airstream. And I'd be up here in New York in the winter, and he'd call me and he'd say, "How you doing?" I'm like, "I'm good." And I said, "How are you?" He said, "I'm on the beach in Texas, riding my motorcycle, eating crab." I'm like, "I don't like you." And he said, "I know." And it was all good. And the beauty for Todd was that he could take his work and he could make unlimited numbers of those prints, right? Uneditioned. So he could sell an 11 by 14 for $125, or he could sell a 40 by 60 for $2,400 or $2,800, and he could sell as many of them as he wanted, right? And art fairs are kind of amazing to me because people walk in and they're like, "It's an art fair," and people sell like blocks of wood, and people are like, "That's art. It's an art fair. It's art," right? People spend money at art fairs. They spend real money, and he found his audience, and he had a website, and he had a following, and he built this up, and he made a good living, right? So that's one way of doing it. So how do art fairs work? You get your booth, and you get your prints, and you submit. So there's a book that'll tell you the best art fairs and how much the average is people make at different art fairs. And you can look that up. You submit your work. It's like $25, $35. Then there's a room with people like this, and everybody's work goes up on the screen, and they'll say yes, no, yes. And if you're accepted, you can buy a space. Depending on how big your booth is or how much you want to spend, you can buy a space. And you go in and you set up, and you wait. You answer a lot of questions about what kind of camera you use and where you traveled and that kind of stuff. And people stop in and you sell your work. I think it's really important, though, that you understand that when you work at art fairs or when you work at small galleries, which we'll talk about in a minute, you don't have to edition your work. And editioning means limiting the number of prints. And larger conceptual galleries or larger galleries are going to want you to limit the number of prints you make of each thing because that creates a certain kind of value, right? So a word about making. I was on a panel with Jeannie Greenberg Van Doren. She was Artemis Greenberg Van Doren Gallery, and I think they just changed the name. It's up on the Upper East Side. And Jeannie said, great artists explore a very narrow vision broadly. And I think that's really genius, right? Think about any great photographer that you know. And their whole lives, really, the majority of their lives, they explored a certain idea with great breadth. And I don't think they felt locked in. We're always worried, like, I'm going to get locked into one thing. But great art careers build on themselves, right? So if you look at Avedon's work, or if you look at Andrus Gursky's work, he looks at ideas of how the structure of places and how we organize things, But he, in each iteration of his work, he looks at that same idea in a different way. He builds on that, right? So great fine art career, if you want a gallery career, each body of work builds on that idea and takes it to a new level. So it isn't something new every time you make it. It's fresh, but you build on it. I think it's important to remember. Todd, and when he worked at art fairs, he shot in Southeast Asia and had to keep his work fresh, but the demands on him conceptually weren't the same as it will be if you want to move into a gallery career. So you want to start a gallery career, you want to get your work out. And let's say there are coffee shops, banks, there are plenty of places, restaurants in the city that want to show your work, right? And it's good. If you're starting out, you want to get your work out, you want to show it to people. It's good to get it out of your apartment, out of your studio, out of your head, right? If you live with your work all the time, it's not healthy. So put it on the wall, put it in a place where people don't know you're the artist. That'll be a real learning experience, I got to tell you. And listen to what people say, because you'll really get an idea of how people perceive your work, whether it's similar to yours or your concept or different, right? We all imagine our audience is going to react a certain way, but you all bring very different experiences and lifestyles to the work that you see, and you all have a different opinion about it. So if you want to show, why do you show at a bank? Well, you want exposure, you want a coffee shop, you want exposure. Generally, there aren't a lot of sales in those places, so I wouldn't count on a lot of sales. But if you do have an exhibition there, you want to invite everyone so they can see your work. And if you work commercially, whenever you have an exhibition, you want to invite the people you work with commercially as well, because it's a great opportunity to talk to the people you're working with commercially about something other than getting a job, right? They get to see your other work, they get to see your photography, you get to talk about other things. It works really well. When I owned the gallery turned out to be one of the best things for my commercial career, because people would come in and look at the artwork. They'd say, oh, you own the gallery? I said, yeah. Do you do anything else? Like, yeah, I'm a photographer. I got a contract with Getty because the Getty team came in and they said, why haven't we met? And I said, well, I don't know, we should. And they said, yeah, come on in tomorrow. I said, okay. I went in and signed a contract, right? I mean, it's just, things happen, right? So if you can create this fine art space, it can help your commercial work as well. So when you go to a coffee shop, a lot of times they'll say, we want 10, 20, 30, 40%. I would never give a coffee shop or a restaurant more than 10% of each sale. And I think that's really important, because you're not selling a lot, you're spending a lot, you're giving them free PR, and you're bringing new people into their space, right? I think it's absurd that somebody wants 30 or 40% to sell your work in that kind of location. 10%, if they're going to sell the work for you, helps cover the sale. If they're not selling the work and you're doing all the sales in addition to making it, framing it, hanging it, and promoting their restaurant, I don't see why they should get a percentage at all, but I guess 10% is fair. Anything more than that, I think, is complete robbery, to be honest. So if you're going to be in those spaces, be sure to negotiate. Don't get taken advantage of. The other thing you need to think of when you begin to exhibit is framing, right? And two things. When you exhibit at a gallery, standard gallery contract is a 50-50 split, right? And 50% as a gallerist means there's not enough for me to make a living or you to make a living. It's a tough way to go, right? It's really hard. So 50-50. And that's important, because a lot of people will frame their work and take it to a gallery. So let's say your prints sell, you're only selling the print. Let's get to that. You're only selling the print. When you price your work, it's the price for one print. Everything else is extra, right? If you mat it, if you mount it, if you frame it, it's all extra, right? We're horrible business people, photographers. We really are. We're like, you like my print? Okay, look, I'll put it on a mat. Oh, you need it mounted? I'll do that for you. Then pretty soon all your profits are gone and you're wondering why you're not making any money, right? We're horrible. So, okay, so if you're going to take a framed print to a gallery, the gallery says, let's say the print is $1,000 and the frame costs you $400. That's $1,400. Some galleries will say 50-50. We get $700 and you get $700. Don't do that, because they're taking half the money you spent on the frame, right? You get the $400 for the frame back, and then you split the $1,000 for the print. If they mark up the frame $100, you split the $100, so you each get 50 of the markup. You get your $400 that you spent on the frame, and then you get half the sale of the print. Does that make sense? Right? But a lot of people get taken advantage of, and again, you lose your profit margin, right? So, okay, you got your work, and you've got these prints, and you really love them, and you know we love our work, right? And because you love your work, it has to be in that exact frame, and you need that mat, and somehow photographers think the thicker the mat, the better the presentation, right? So if there was like an 87 ply mat, some of you would buy it, right? I mean, you would. You'd be like, no, that print really rocks. But you really, what you need to do is be aware of your costs out of the gate, right? Because, and you can easily spend 7, 8, 9, 10 grand on framing, printing, mounting, and putting up an exhibition. And the problem is, if you don't have sales, that work goes home and it sits in your closet. And then every time you open your closet, you hate your work, right? And you hate it a little more every time you look at it. And there's 10 grand, and I could use that 10 grand, and why did I do that? And I know that because I lived it for a while, right? Like, I had prints for my first exhibition for years, for a while. And, you know, and I face mounted them on plexi, which sounds like a really great idea. But when you put a quarter or half-inch piece of plexi on something, it isn't a photo anymore, it's an object, right? It's now this beautiful object. Now, two things happen. One, plexi is really soft and scratches really easily. Two, people need a very specific room to be able to hang that in. And third, it looks really beautiful when you're at the lab and you're looking at your print and this plexi over it. But when it's on the wall, I literally had people like fixing their hair in the blacks because the reflection was so good. So people would go and look at themselves and be like, oh man, it's my work. Like, they didn't care. So be aware of the choices you make. So if you're going to frame things, try not to spend too much money, right? And the other problem with spending a lot of money is this. Let's say your print sells for $600, right? And then you want to put a $400 frame on it because that frame, that's what that should be, right? So maybe there's an impulse buy at $600. I'll buy that for $600. But then you make it $1,000. What, $1,000? I don't know, maybe I'm not going to buy it. Now I'm thinking twice, right? So you start with this many people who buy it for $6. Then you put it here at $1,000 because now it's maybe a little more, and maybe next time, and I don't know, there's something else I'd like. And then you put it in the exact frame that you like that print has to be in because that's what it needs to be. The problem is not everybody in the world believes that, and maybe it doesn't match their decor. So now you've taken, and there are this many people who love your print, love that frame, and want to spend $1,000. So you've taken this many people who might have bought that $600 print, and you've reduced your audience to this, and you wonder why you're not having sales, right? So you need to watch what you're doing with your audience and how much money you spend. The other thing photographers do is we love black frames, and I blame it all on Ansel Adams because it's black and white, and he framed everything in black, and we love that, and it's gorgeous. So if I have it in a black frame, it's valid, right? The problem is, if you walk into a gallery, it's generally a white room, right? And most of you shoot color, some black and white, but a lot of color. And if you walk into a room with, let's say, a white wall with 20 color prints framed in black, what's the first thing you see? 20 black squares, right? You don't see the work because you can't beat the graphic of 20 black squares on a white wall. You just can't, right? So I'm going to suggest you frame in white or off-white, right? And then you get a nice little shadow from the light, so it throws a little shadow, so it separates from the wall. And then when you walk in, what do you see? 20 photographs of your work, right? Which is the whole point. You want people to see and engage with your work. Now, if you're doing black and white and the frames are beautiful and that makes sense, go for it. But consider a little different way of framing and presenting that allows people to engage with the work. My point is you frame and you don't need to spend a lot of money, and you also don't want to create things that are barriers to selling your work or barriers to your success. I had a girl, when we owned the gallery, I used to give a lot of young artists, and young meaning any age, but new in your career, right? You can be any age and be an emerging artist, and any age and be a mid-career artist. It isn't an age thing, it's just where you are in the life of your career. So there was a girl, May Fato, and she went and photographed with film on a snowy, foggy winter day, an old sports field in Baltimore. So it was snowing and foggy, and the sun was coming up from the back, and these pictures were backlit, and it looked like a painting, and they shifted blue in the early morning light. And then you had these great graphics of like the goalposts and the shot put cage and all this kind of stuff, and they were stunning, absolutely stunning. And May said, I don't want any mats and I don't want any glass. I just want a thin white frame around everything. And I was like, we're never gonna sell these. And I said, she said, no, really, I just want to do this. Let's do it. And I said, all right. So I gave in, and we bled the photos to the edge, and we put a little white frame around it. And I have to say, instead of walking up to the photo and standing back 10 feet or 5 feet and looking like this, people got right up to them. They didn't touch them, but they were right there looking at them, and they were engaged. It gave an access to the work, a little less formality that allowed people to engage. And the work was stunning. So we'll talk about this work when we talk about editions. But what we did was we started to sell them. They started to sell like crazy. And the framing costs were low, so if somebody wanted a frame, we got 20 by 24 frames for, I don't know, $80 or $120, handmade, not store-bought. And we got the larger frames for a little bit more. And if we needed to, we'd sell the print, and we could pop the print out so people could buy it mounted and framed, or unmounted. And we paid May's rent for a long time. I think in that first month, she made $17,000 in her first exhibition. And then we had people, because they were selling so fast, asking what was next, right? What's May's next body of work? What's her next? We want to know what's next. We want to get in on it before it goes for sale and you have the next exhibition, right? Unknown artist, but people loved it so much. May completely freaked out, couldn't take the pressure, started to party too much, took the money, went to Germany with her boyfriend, and came back like 2.5 years later with, ironically, photographs of garbage, which I couldn't sell. So, sometimes success is a tough thing. I think she thought it would just last forever, but it freaked her out. She never imagined. So she did really well. So one of the reasons those prints did well, and so Todd, he sells his work in uneditioned, as many as he wants. And Todd was always angry because he always wanted a gallery career. And my argument to Todd was, if you have a gallery career, you're going to kill your career. He'd say, why? And I said, if I take one of your prints, then it's stunning work, and put it in my gallery in Chelsea, I have to edition it. It has to be an edition of 10 or 15 or 7. I can't sell unlimited edition, there's no such thing as unlimited edition, but I can't sell an open-ended number of prints for the amount that you do, for $2,600 or $2,800. None of my collectors will buy it. So for him, the right choice was not editioning his work. I'll give you another example. There was a gentleman who wanted to do a show, and he had been photographing women in the South and around the DC area on Sunday afternoons in small black churches. Women in beautiful hats and people who got dressed up for church. They were beautiful, beautiful portraits. They're amazing. He too wanted an exhibition. He also had some small museums that were interested in his work, and somebody was writing a play based on his project. Amazing. And all the characters, a list of the characters that he'd photographed. So he'd use the names and they'd dress like that, and the play was going to tour. So he said, look, I want to be in the gallery, I want to do this. I said, I'd love to, but I'll tell you what, we can do the same thing. In my space, we could do editions of maybe 10, 12. You can bring them in, we can charge X amount of money, and we can do the show. I'd be happy to have you. I said, but why don't you make it an edition of 400? And then pick the 4 favorite characters and make an edition of 400 and sell them for like $200 each. And then at every museum they're at, or every time you have a play, and he had a series of playhouses that were going to do it, people can come out and be like, oh my gosh, I love Julie. Oh, we should buy a picture of Julie. That'd be amazing. We should put it on our wall, right? So instead of making a couple grand or $4 or $5 grand that you might have made with me, if you wanted to follow that business model and sell original prints, signed prints at the museums and at the theater, he had a chance, I don't know how many tens of thousands of dollars we came up with, but we multiplied it out. And it just didn't make any sense for him to edition those prints as much as he wanted to be in the gallery. It's all about the marketplace, right? It's finding the right market for your work. And we tend to think of gallery careers or fine art careers in a single way, and that's not the case. You need to be smart about it, right? So editioning. May's prints, we got to get some things out of the way about editioning. So if you make an edition of 10, let's say, of a picture, a photograph of you, that's an edition of 10. It means there are 10 of those in the world. If you make an edition of 10 20 by 24 inch prints, and I know there's some famous artists who have worked around this in other ways, but they're famous. But if you make an edition of 10 prints in 20 by 24, and then you make 10 more 30 by 40s, that's not a new edition. It's now 20 prints. It's now 20 prints of the same photograph, right? If I buy that first 20 by 24 and I think there are only 10 of those in the world and I give you $2,000, and then I find out there are 20 of them, I'm a little upset, right? The art world strangely works on a lot of trust. You tell me there are 10 prints of that. I go tell this gentleman there are 10 prints. He says, I like it. I'll give you $2,000 for one of 10. That's all great. He's happy. I'm happy. You're happy. But if somewhere along the line one of us isn't telling the truth, our reputations aren't intact, and then our careers begin to fall apart, right? So think about editioning. Like if you want to do an edition of 15 in 20 by 24 and 30 by 40, go for it. They can be more than one size. If you want to do an edition of 15 in 3 different sizes, go for it. But be honest about how many prints there are in the world of that image. If you have an image and this is the photograph, and then you want to crop in on one of the people's faces and say that's another edition, that's really sketchy too, right? Photographers are weird. Like we spend more time trying to find workarounds than actually dealing with the issue. And we can make work in 1,000th of a second, right? There's a lot of production, a lot of time that goes into it, but we can. And I have photographers who complain about having to come up with a new show every year and a half. But imagine if you're a sculptor or a painter. and how long it takes to make each one of those, right? Yeah, and these people come up with a new exhibition every year or two. But a photographer, and they create a new piece because they sell one. But photographers, if you have one piece that's selling well, you want to sell it in every way that you can imagine, right? It doesn't matter. So think about that. If I'm at an art fair and I see a print, and on the wall is a calendar or a magazine that print is in, that makes that print more valuable, right? Wow, look, it's in the calendar, we should get one. Look, it's in the magazine, we should get one. If your work is in a contemporary gallery and it's in a calendar, it's now worth less. Unless it's the Pirelli calendar or something like that, right? Because whenever you take something in a high-end fine art space and you put it in the mass media, unless it's a story about you or a story about your work, you've now devalued it, right? Because exclusivity has a certain value. So that's why auditioning makes a certain difference. So one of the arguments against auditioning is, well, if I can sell 50 of these, or 30 of these, I'll make X amount of dollars, right? But you could sell 30 at $500 a piece, or maybe $400 a piece. It's hard to sell 30 of anything, let's be honest. You know, if you have 20 prints in your exhibition and you think you're going to sell 30 of each, bless you if you do. But I think it's really hard. But if you have an edition of 7 or 10, you raise the price as you move through that edition, right? So the first print in an edition, number one, costs the least. And in resale in the secondary marketplace, it's worth the most. Why? Because it's the first, and the first person pays the least for it because they're taking the greatest risk, right? And the resale is highest because the greatest risk was taken. That person had vision, they bought it, there's different value. And the price goes up as you go through the edition. So what are the values of that? One is you can, in a smaller number of prints, make a similar amount of money, which is great. So you really aren't out. And it's much easier to sell 10 prints than 30. It just is. And if I bought that first print at $700 and that third print, or that 10th print sells for $2,200, I'm telling all of my friends, right? Oh my God, I bought that. You know, you've got to meet this photographer. It's amazing. I bought that for $700. It's selling for $2,200 now. I feel like my investment has paid off, right? Whether it's paid off or not is a whole other story, but now inherently there's a certain value to that, right? There's a certain value. So what you have are people who will come back and buy your work over and over because you're creating value. They feel good about what they've purchased, right? And you want collectors to come back. So auditioning helps you in that way too. It helps you build collectors, and it also helps your collector feel like they're getting value. So when you have another exhibition, they're going to want to come back and buy one more. They're going to look for what you do next, right? It makes us feel good. I think it's important. So value, how much value is in a picture? A photograph is worth, honestly, the cost of the paper and whatever you printed it with, right? 20 bucks, 30 bucks, 5 bucks, right? Whatever. That's the value of a piece of artwork. That's the inherent value, physical value. The rest is all perception, right? Why is Picasso worth more? Because we believe that Picasso was a great artist and he did great things. Museums buy him whenever he goes to exhibition or to auction. The work is more valuable. People want it. Collectors want it. Museums want it. Picasso's very valuable artwork, right? Photographs. Why does Andres Gursky sell work for millions of dollars? Well, what he does now frequently, first his work is like wall size, but second, he'll frequently make 3 prints. One print goes to one museum, one print goes to another museum, and the third print is available to collectors. And you're talking about multimillionaires and billionaires who all want to be the person that owns that one Gursky. Well, you get to sell that print for quite a bit of money, right? Because the print is already valid. It's been placed with 2 museums. Has provenance, right? It's great, and it's straight from the artist. So I want to buy that third one as a collector, right? So there's a perceived value based on that, right? If you came to my gallery, I worked with a lot of new artists, helped build some careers, and you could come in and let's say I could sell your work for $2,000, maybe $3,000. The range at my gallery was really between $800 and $5,000-ish. Those are my clients. Those are just the people who walk through my door. You could take that same print to Matthew Marks, and you go into Matthew Marks' gallery and you'd say, Matthew, here's my work, I hope you like me. And he said, oh yes, you know, and you have a meeting with Matthew, it's like meeting the Pope, and you know, and he looks at your work and say, yes, I like it, and he anoints you, and he takes your work and he sells your work for $10,000 a print. Same print. Why? Because Matthew Marks said it's worth $10,000 a print. And he has X number of people whose careers he's built and work he's sold that has validated that $10,000 price. Make sense? People believe that. They trust it. So you say, well, if Matthew Marks can do that, why doesn't he just take more photographers, more people, and sell their work? Well, the problem is if Matthew has one bad show and somebody's work doesn't sell and their career doesn't move forward, happens, right? But if Matthew has 2 of those or 3 of those, he takes too many chances and that work doesn't sell through in the long run, then all of a sudden Matthew Marks isn't Matthew Marks anymore. And the gallery isn't the gallery. And all of a sudden he doesn't have that trust of the buyer. And then everybody's career fails, right? So the higher you are up on the ladder, the less risk you can take. You can send your portfolio to MoMA and they will look at it. It can take a year sometimes, but they will look at it, right? So, and the curator at MoMA can really, generally, if somebody's curating an exhibition, they can put your work in their show. They can, right? If I'm a curator and I believe in your work and I want to put it in the show, I can put it in the show. So what happens? Well, if I'm the curator at MoMA and I have one show that's maybe not quite right and the reviews in the New Yorker and New York Times all of a sudden begin to question what I'm thinking, and then I have a second one that quite doesn't make sense, and pretty soon people don't, wonder if my taste level is there and my ability to bring together a dialogue, a visual dialogue isn't as strong as it used to be. Pretty soon I'm, the curator at the Toledo Museum of Art, right? Because those careers end very quickly. So the higher up you go, the more power you have, but the problem is the risk factor is much larger, right? So people can show your work, and yes, they can make your career. And if you wonder why that doesn't happen, is because there's a risk reward at that level that's much higher than, say, when I had my space, which was a lot of fun and quite frankly, really indulgent. It made money. I promised myself I wouldn't keep the gallery if it didn't make money, but I had a lot more flexibility and I had a lot more fun. I didn't have as much to lose as somebody like Matthew Marks. Problem is when you want to be a gallerist, at some point, or a full-time fine artist, that has to be your life 24 hours a day. And I wasn't ready to make my clients the people I went to dinner with every night, and I wasn't ready to give it up. And art fairs came in, and I'm not a particular fan. I love to go to the Armory, but I don't want to pay $10,000 or $20,000 to be there and hope to make that back. They're not a lot of fun. Okay, so auditions. So you're going to audition if you want to be in a higher level gallery, if you want to show in a gallery that's not just a small gallery, local gallery. And if you audition your prints, you're going to raise the price. And then the argument is always, well, if they're only 10, what if they sell for $1 million one day? And then I don't get any money. I don't make any money, right? Sorry, I keep hitting my mic. I don't make any money, right? So what am I going to do? Well, you have artist proofs, A.P. Artist proofs are 1 or 2 prints. Don't make an edition of 10 and 10 artist proofs. That's not right. But edition of, say, 10 and 2 artist proofs, edition of 15, 2 artist proofs, edition of 7, 2 artist proofs. Those artist proofs are yours. They are yours to keep and do whatever you want. You can put it in a drawer and pull it out when your work's worth $1 million and sell it and you get your own $1 million, or you can do whatever you want. Now, how many of you give away your work as gifts? Okay? Yeah, sometimes. Here you go. Okay. Family, friends, right? Hey, I want to give you some of my work. I like you. Thank you. Oh my gosh, I love it. I'm going to put it on the wall. You're like, oh, thank you. You hug each other. Everybody kisses. It's so amazing, right? Right? It's the same. My mom, my second year, I got a degree and then I went back to photo school, and my mom had a still life that I made in my second year of photo school, framed in cherry wood on the wall forever. Like every time I went home, I was like, oh, I love it so much. Like, it's nice. So anyway, so you give it away. The problem is the people around you are going to be the earliest supporters of your work when you start to exhibit, right? And you're telling everybody around you the value of your work is free, right? So everybody perceives this. They make great photography, love the photography. I've got a bunch of it. It's great, right? It's free. So if you have an artist proof, well, I want to give you a gift. Okay, that's great. There are only 10 of these, and I have 2 artist proofs. I want to give you one of the 2 that I have. The prints sell for $1,000 a piece. I want to give you one of the other 2 that I have. I'm going to keep the other one. Oh my gosh. You've now just given me a piece of artwork worth $1,000, right? Still the same print, different context, different concept. You're not lying. It's true, right? Now I'm telling everybody in the world, oh my God, my son gave me $1,000. These sell for $1,000. I can't believe I got it. He has 2. He gave me one, right? Are you lying? No. Is it wrong? No, it's true. You create the same perception. I'm not telling you to manipulate people, but it's business, right? You need to understand the art marketplace. The same way a gallery does it, you need to understand you create your value. I can, as a gallerist, create your value, but if you don't begin to create value for yourself, nobody else will, especially in the beginning, right? If you're not doing that, I have to say, these talks, it's funny, it just made me think of it. These talks, when I first started speaking, man, it wasn't easy. You know, you go out and I would travel and I would talk about different stuff, but you know, it was hard and people wouldn't show up and nobody knows who you are. But I enjoy this, and I think it's important to give information that most people don't give to other people. So yeah, you need to build, right, a certain credibility, and that gives you other opportunities. You need to do the same thing with your art career. If you don't want to build your career, you can't just count on a gallerist to do it for you. And if as a gallerist, I could only do so much. I had 14 people under contract, and then we had group shows, right? So when you go to a gallery, your goal, hopefully, is to get into a group show, right? Because that's what you do. You test run people in group shows. And if my clients like it, then I'll give you a solo show. But you need to realize that I planned my exhibitions 9 to 12 months out. I had to, because people were making work, and I had to count on that. And your gallery schedule is kind of like a little bit of piece of music, right? It needs to have a flow to it. So you need to understand what's going to happen. So you have a group show in maybe January or August or the slow months, right, in the summer, and the rest are solo shows because those are your big sales. Bless you. So it's important when you begin to go to galleries to realize that they can't show your work right away. And if somebody, I had a gentleman who wanted to show his work, and he came in and he said, hey, you know what, I got to show at the gallery downstairs. I can't wait to show with you. And I said, it's going to be 1.5 years until I can show your work. He said, why? I said, because it's 1.5 years until your collectors are going to want to buy another piece. For me, for my collectors, that's the way it was. The other thing you need to realize is galleries are, when I had the gallery, there were 350 galleries in Chelsea, right? So people had to walk by a lot of galleries to come to my space on the 7th floor at 526, a lot. And they had to really want to purchase what was in that space, right? So I learned very quickly when I started the space, I showed a lot of cool stuff that I loved and people loved, but nobody knew why they should come back to the gallery, right? It was just, okay, well that's cool, but I get a different group every month. It took me a long time to realize that galleries are a little bit, the best analogy I have are like clothing stores, right? If I say the Gap, you get an image in your head, right? If I see Versace, Calvin Klein, Chanel, right? You have different images in your head, different price points, different images. Galleries are the same thing. Whether it's individuals or corporations, people had to want to come to my space because they knew the kind of work they'd get at a certain price point or a certain price range, right? And that's why they made the trek up. And that's important. As you begin to look for galleries, you need to begin to understand the kind of artists that each gallery represents. Galleries aren't just galleries, right? Each gallery represents a certain kind of work in a certain price range and sells to a certain clientele. There was a gallery on this, I only had one artist that did portraits that I could sell, and that was part of a larger body of work. But I couldn't sell portraits. But Marvelli Gallery on the 2nd floor, that's all they sold. And I couldn't believe it. He made me crazy, right? Because he would sell portraits for thousands of dollars. I couldn't sell one, right? So if you want to do portraits, it didn't matter that we were just 5 floors apart. You needed to be with Marvelli. It didn't matter how hard I worked. It just wasn't in my world. So you need to understand that when you begin to go to galleries. It's really sometimes very specific. Less specific when you get into smaller towns, less specific when you get outside of major metropolitan areas, but I think it's really important that you understand. It's frustrating. The other thing you need to realize is if there are, let's say there are 10,000 galleries in the United States. If 9,994 of those galleries hate your work, you can have a really great career, right? If six galleries want to exhibit you, that's an amazing career, right? So we get really frustrated. We're like, they don't like my work, they're not, I don't fit there, where am I gonna fit? I can't believe it, I'm really frustrated, I'm gonna quit. You need to find your voice, you need to find your space, right? It's really important. The other thing that happens is, as you own a gallery, you get more people sending you work and less of it becomes relevant. It becomes really hard to find people to fit your space. Why? Because you become more defined, right? So there's a lot of work that I liked, that I loved actually, that I couldn't sell. So sometimes when you get a no, it isn't that your work is horrible, it just doesn't fit my space, right? because I can't sell it to those clients. You, on the other end, you're there and you're like, oh my God, everybody needs my work. Well, no, maybe it just isn't right for where you're sending it to, or maybe it isn't the right time, or maybe you need to give it a lead time. So there's a lot of rejection in our world, right? I was an exhibiting artist. I would walk into places and say, do you love me? And hope somebody would, and thankfully a couple people did and a lot of people didn't. That's okay. I mean, I just told my students as a Parsons, I showed a bunch of abstract work at one point, and it was manipulated film abstract, and it wasn't like photos of a wall abstract. So when I was at Art Center, I started to make these, and my professors told me, very nice, and we appreciate your effort, but you should put these away in a drawer and never show them to anybody. So I put them in a drawer, and I closed the drawer, and I opened a studio. It was a photo studio at the time in Chelsea. And a friend of mine down the hall, William, was an artist, and his gallerist came in, and his gallerist and her husband came down, and I said, oh, nice to meet you, what do you do, bless you? And I said, well, I showed him my commercial make. They said, no, what else do you do? So I opened that drawer and I pulled these out, and I was really a little shy, and they said, oh my gosh, you need to make these big, you should sell them. You can make money. And I was like, really? And they're like, yes. I blew them up, and I got a gallery in New York, and I blew them up, got a gallery in LA, and we sold them, and it was really great, right? So if you listen to everybody that tells you that you shouldn't show your work and shouldn't do what you do, you end up not doing anything, right? And it was a really great lesson for me. The other lesson is, and I tell my students this, is part of the art world that we talked about is to create something different, something that's next, right? If they're not creating, I have a career. If they're not gonna pass me up, then we're both in trouble, right? So you need to allow yourself, free yourself up a little bit. There's nothing wrong with making prints like Ansel Adams and shooting beautiful landscapes or doing beautiful portraits or nudes or whatever you want to do. Maybe lifestyle, your family, documentary, all of that is valid. But allow yourself some range to experiment and try, right? Make some things that make you nervous. One of the best fashion shoots I ever did, I got the film back and I looked at it and I was so nervous I just put it in a drawer for 3 days, right? Because it was so new to me. But it was a really great move forward in my work, but it made me really nervous that maybe it was wrong, maybe people didn't like it, right? So allow yourself that range. That's what the art world's about, right? You should have that freedom. It should really be kind of fun. So galleries, there is a hierarchy to galleries. Is a gallery in Milwaukee as good as a gallery in Chicago? Probably not. Is a gallery in Chicago as valuable as a gallery in Miami? I don't think so. Is a gallery in Miami as good as one in, say, Houston? Maybe they're equivalent. One in Houston as good as one in San Francisco, depending on the gallery? Probably not. Is a gallery in New York stronger than one in San Francisco? Generally, outside of one or two. Is one in the Lower East Side as good as one in Chelsea? Maybe. In Williamsburg as good as the Manhattan? Sorry, no. First time somebody said that they were moving to BK, I thought they were moving to Bangkok. The BK. So where'd that come from? So anyway, so Manhattan? No, is one in Chelsea as good as one on the Upper East Side? Maybe, it depends on the gallery, right? There's a hierarchy there. And you need to build your career up that hierarchy. There's nothing wrong with that. Success begets success. And I think that's really important. You need to start to exhibit, because everybody who takes a chance on you and your work makes the next person feel more comfortable taking that chance, right? So you need to find an in, you need to find a place to begin to build some exhibition history and to show and to resolve how you're going to edit your work and have it make sense. There's nothing wrong, absolutely nothing wrong with exhibiting around the country or outside of the city if you don't start here, right? Absolutely no shame in that, and it doesn't mean you won't show here. You just need to slowly build your career. If you move up the ladder, if you're Matthew Marks, do you want to go back and show my gallery? No, right? If you're selling work for $3,000 and then you want to go back and sell that same work for $1,000, no, you can't do that, right? You can't. So in terms of sales, we'll go back to pricing. In terms of sales, it's great. Like again, if somebody wants to buy one of your prints for $5,000, you want to say yes. But if that's an edition of 10, you've now set the price at $5,000 for all those prints. Maybe you'll sell them for $5,000, but maybe you won't, right? And now you're stuck with a whole body of work that you can't sell. Maybe a $3,000 sale is better in the long run because it allows you to build your career. As a gallerist, I probably can't take you on at $5,000 if you're new. Things to consider, right? So gallery hierarchy, you want to build your way up that gallery hierarchy, and you want to build credibility, because that makes it easier for me to begin to show your work. So you want to work your way through that. Sorry, I talk and then I just get so far off track as I just start to talk whatever next. So when you go to a gallery, let's talk about working with a gallery. As a gallerist, I would promote your work. So I'd put your work in the gallery guide or wherever else. If you wanted an ad in Art in America or Art Forum, that's expensive and it doesn't always pay. So maybe if you've exhibited before, we might do that, or you might pay that cost, or we might split that cost. But when you're starting out, I think it's hard to expect a gallerist to make that. So let's say in my little space, let's say I needed to make, let's make it easy. Let's say I need to make $5,000, $6,000 a month just to break even. That's not to live, that's not to feed my dog, it's just to break even, pay the rent, pay my staff, pay promotion, pay for that wine, electric, everything else, right? So you want an exhibition in that space. That means in your exhibition, I need to sell $10,000 worth of your work just to break even. Think about that. $20,000 worth of your work if I want to make $5,000 that month. Just to put it in a little perspective, right? So it's important when you begin to approach galleries to understand your situation and theirs. From your side, okay, so you're going to make we're going to sell $10,000 worth of work. How much are the prints going to cost you? How much is the framing? Are you going to ship? For us, we're a small gallery. If it was your first exhibition, you would ship to and from the gallery. It was a risk. I was taking a chance. Maybe you didn't have an exhibition history. You shipped to and from. If you had success, then I'd pay one way and you would pay one way. And if you had success again, then I would pay the round trip, right? Every time you evidence the ability to resell and grow and continue to make work, there were benefits and we would absorb more of the cost because I thought that was fair and it seems to make sense. There's some galleries that'll pay for framing, there's some galleries that'll pay for other things. Those are hard to find out of the gate, right? So be aware of your expenses when you're going into this. It's going to cost you something to build a career, but as a gallerist, I need to think about it economically and think how much am I making and does this exhibition make sense? So again, when you go into a gallery, imagine that and think about what they have to make. In terms of insurance, I know gallerists who have damaged work and handed it back and not given anybody a dime for it. I don't know. I had a woman who had an award-winning piece. Laura, I can still picture her face. She had an award-winning piece and we put it in the center of the gallery. It was a sculpture. I swear to God, we were at our desks and we just watched it go. Our hearts sunk, my heart sunk. I had to call her and tell her that her award-winning piece was now in pieces on the floor. So, what do you do? As photographers, what do you do? So let's take a photograph. Laura was great. I paid for the repair. I gave her something towards the value of the work. She repaired it. We had it back in the exhibition, but I also gave her a little extra because, just because. So as a photographer, let's say something gets lost or damaged, right? If the piece sells for $5,000 and you were going to get $500, you don't get $1,000. You get your $500, right? I think that's only fair. You get the percentage of the sale you were going to get. You don't get the whole percentage of the sale. A lot of people, if something gets damaged, want the whole sale price. You get your percentage. That makes sense, right? Insurance. We insured everything in our space for water, fire, damage, but you want to make sure that the gallery you're with does. The other thing you want to do is get a delivery memo. When you drop off your work, you make a list of everything that you drop off, the name of the print, the size, the material, the edition number 1 of 7, and the quality, like it's in excellent condition, right? And then the value. And you set that value with the gallerist, right? You don't say they're worth $20,000 a piece if you don't have an exhibition history. All right, you list everything that the gallerist gets. They sign it, you sign it. They can keep the original. You can take a Xerox. Why can you take a copy? Because if you have a copy, nobody can change that copy, right? They can do whatever they want to that handwritten copy, but you have something and you can prove that that's what happened. So whenever your work is sold, let's say 2 of those prints are sold. You go back in, now you get an updated memo. They give you a memo saying, we sold number 1 of 7 of this and this size at this cost. We sold number 3 of 7 at this. You get that back, right? Why do you want that? Because you want a running total of your inventory with galleries. I know photographers and other artists who've given a lot of work to galleries who then say, we don't have it. And what do? You say, I'm going to sue you. And they'll say, okay, sue me. What do you have? You go to court and you say, he took my work. And I said, I never got this guy's work, right? They're bad people, right? These aren't everybody, but you need to protect yourself. It's a business. So get a delivery memo. When you get that work back, when you get 7 prints back, make sure there's a signed copy that the gallery has that says, look, you got your work back. We hold 0 prints, right? So everything's clean and everyone's protected. I had an artist, after we had to let her go, we would bring our artists to art fairs. And I thought that was really nice because they get to meet the collectors can meet them. And one girl, a collector, came up, and it turns out she was trying to make backroom deals at the art fair with collectors for her work. Like, if you buy it from me, it'll be less, and don't worry, I won't tell them. And so at the end of the art fair, I didn't invite her back, and I let her go, and she screamed and yelled, and why do you do it? I can't believe. And I told her that people came up and told me. And then later on she wrote, and she said, you still have my work? And I said, no, I don't have a delivery memo. You collected everything you gave me. It's signed. It's got, right? All those things are important. The value of a relationship is important. The relationship with the gallery is really important. What happens is, right, my best advice for you today, my best, honest God, best advice is don't be crazy. And what happens is when somebody, right? You look maybe, but no, you look. But what happens is people like your work and you get excited, right? Like they love my work, right? I get excited. So you can send an email, and whenever you're that happy, don't respond, because you say things, right? Like one guy, he sent me these really beautiful images of little paintings. And I said, you know what, I really love these. And we'd been corresponding. I said, I really love these. If you ever get to New York, please stop in, bless you, please stop in and show them to me in person, because I'm interested in giving you an exhibition. His response was, I hope I cast a spell on you. That guy's not getting near my dog. He's not getting here, right? Like, I don't know. I hope I cast, he just said, thank you, I can't wait to meet you. We would have been fine, right? And, another guy, it was, and they're both from Seattle, so I think it's something in Seattle. He wrote the water, yeah. So I had an artist who had an exhibition who couldn't get the work done in time. They had the June slot, really great slot, and they just wouldn't bring in the prints. So I finally said, if you don't have them in, you don't get the exhibition. We canceled. There's a person I'd been speaking to, again, I said, hey man, I've always liked your work. I have a space open. Let's do it. He's like, yeah, great, let's do it. And we're going through the details. All of a sudden I get this email. Tom, I really think that if your gallery website listed the prices of all the work on that you're selling, your gallery would be much more respectable and credible. And I really think that that's really, and there's a whole long list about how I need to change the website so the gallery is more credible and respectable. So I wrote him and I said, really, thank you for the advice. I think it's important, and I do think it's important that you work with somebody that you find credible and trustworthy and respectable, and I think you should do that. I wish you all the luck in the future. Thank you, Thomas. And there was about a 10-minute delay, and I must have gotten 20 emails back, like blah, 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 blah. I didn't read any of them, right? Don't be crazy. We weren't friends, we were business partners. We might have become friends, but at that point, here's the way I run my business. If you want to be part of it and we can find a way to do that, great. I give you a contract, which we'll talk about. So I'm not just saying send me your work. I'm not saying don't give me a delivery memo. And if you want to work with somebody who works in a certain way, you should find those people, right? But once I gave him the exhibition, all of a sudden he was like, felt he should do something else. Not that he shouldn't. He should work with whomever he wants. But you need to find that relationship. Don't be crazy. I had a guy come in who had really beautiful inkjet prints, really beautiful landscapes. I couldn't sell ink. Well, first I have a silver fetish. I admit it publicly, openly. I love silver prints. I collect them adamantly around the world. But my collectors too, for whatever reason, not because I did that, but they just wouldn't buy inkjet from me, right? They just wouldn't. Whatever you call them, glycé or glycé, giclée, thank you. Giclée is inkjet, right? But people, no, it's a giclée, no, it's an inkjet. So then pigment, right? It's actually a pigment print. It's sprayed pigments. You should call it a pigment print, right? They're inkjet prints. It's sprayed carbon, so they're carbon prints. Call it what it is. So I said, look, if you can do these in silver, I will give you an exhibition. And he was like, really? And I said, yeah, let's see if they translate and you're happy and I'm happy. If you want to do a test print or two, go for it and come back. So he's like, yeah, okay, great. He was really excited. He walked out, he came back down the hall and he's like, how dare you tell me how to run my art career? I'm not telling you to change a thing. All I'm saying is I can sell silver prints and I can't sell the prints you brought in. I like your work, but I can't do it. He was angry. He came back 3 days in a row. I tell you, 3 days in a row to tell me how wrong I was and how I was trying to tell artists how to do their careers. I said, I'm sorry, it's just the way it works, right? So sometimes it isn't personal, it's just the way the gallery works, right? Don't be crazy. The other thing is, somebody sent me a sample of their work, and they sent it certified mail. So I had to leave the gallery and go to the main post office. You know how not fun that main post office is? And stand in line, close the space, thinking the IRS was after me, right? And I get this letter, and it's from a guy who wanted to be sure I got his submission. It is the only time I wrote a handwritten response immediately. I opened it, I wrote back. I said, what are you thinking? I thought I put it back in, sealed it, and sent it back. Don't, just don't, remember, if we all want to know somebody saw our work, but one of two things happens when we'll talk about promotion. One of two things happens when I see your work. I either like it, and it gets put in a folder of landscapes or portraits or whatever you do for a future exhibition, or I keep samples in a drawer, or it gets thrown out. Those are the only two things that happen, right? I like it and I consider it, or I write you and say, can I see more? I go to your website, whatever you have, or it doesn't work for us. And you shouldn't feel bad either way. But I had a guy from Texas, I'm sure it was the artist, but some guy called and said, hi, I'm the representative for, whoever. We'd like to know if you've received the work and what you think. Like, man, this conversation 90% of the time isn't going to end well, right? Because if I like the work, I would have called or written, or I would call in the future. If I don't like the work, and I had to be honest, I said, I don't remember the work. Well, that hurts, right? But you get like hundreds of submissions a week sometimes. I didn't remember the work. He was very upset. He was very hurt. Can you give me some feedback? I'll describe the work. It's just, so it's hard, right? I know it's really hard, but you need to remember, as stuff goes in, sometimes people, if they like it, they'll keep it and they'll contact you. But if you follow up, it becomes really awkward sometimes, and more awkward for you than anyone else. In terms of promotion, I still think, you can email, right? Email's great, it's free, you can email people. You always want to contact the gallery director. The gallery director decides what the shows are, the exhibitions are. Other people work in the gallery, but the gallery director does that. So you write the director, and the beautiful thing about email is it's free. The other horrible thing about email is delete, right? Because if you have time, you can flip through a bunch of emails, but it's really easy to hit delete, so you don't want to do that. You can send, what I would send is, not hi, I'd like to have an exhibition with you. We all know that's why you're writing, right? I'd like to introduce myself. Here's a body of work on the Salton Sea. I hope you find it interesting. I've included 2 samples. 72 DPI, 5x7, 8x10 size is all you need in the email. Here's a link to my website. Here's a link to my Instagram. Here's a link to wherever you want me to go. Thank you for your time and consideration. That's it. If I like the work, I'm going to click on the link, right? It's that easy. I think mailing things is still great because fewer people do, commercially or not. I have people who are editors, commercial editors, who say that nobody sends stuff in anymore. So I think mailing a card is really great. Little card, image on the front, your contact information on the back. Again, you need to tell me what the medium is, right? If I don't know what kind of medium you're making this photograph in, I can't imagine it. It's a postcard. So send something in. You don't have to spend a lot of money. That's great. Your website, I think your website should be really clean and simple. You don't need to spend a lot of money on a website. The website's about your work. And if you think that getting a website with moving things and music and everything else is going to make your work better, it isn't, right? You don't need a better website, you need better work, right? It's about your work. So all I want to see is the work. And I want to be able to drag and drop it. I know that's horrible. I was on the board of ASMP. I know copyright and all that. But you want to be able to see the work. I want to drag it and drop it into folders. So whenever you title something, if you're going to put a little watermark on there, or if you're going to title all your files, put your name and add the title of everything. If you email me something, put your name and your contact information, your name and your email, and the name of every image you send, right? Because if that gets thrown into a folder, and then I have to figure out who sent that to me 6 months ago, I'm gonna be crazy. It's never gonna end up in the exhibition, right? Or if I'm curating an exhibition, I have 20 people and I'm gonna curate it down to 20 images, and all of a sudden I have a folder full of images without anybody's name on it. You just hate people at that point because it's so much work to go follow it all the way back. Always put your name in your file when you name your files, right? So you can mail things, and you can also make a package, right? A little promotional package. You can put a thumb drive, you can put a couple, don't put original prints, but you can put a couple of promotional pieces. You can put your CV, right? In your CV, you should have your exhibition history, maybe if you have any reviews, if you have art education, anything, listing that might be of interest. You can do an artist statement, and an artist statement shouldn't start out generally to a gallery in New York. I grew up in Wyoming, loving the prairie, and because I love the prairie, I begin to photograph every morning because it brings my happiness to my soul. That might be the case, but I really want to understand what those landscapes are about in Wyoming, not the fact that you were drawn to them because you grew up there, right? So an artist statement should describe what you do, right? How you do it, what your process is, what the concept is. Are these beautiful landscapes, which there's nothing wrong with? Are they, like we talked about the pictures you take in New York as you're walking to your work at B&H? Are they landscapes about something? Is it traces of man in the landscape of the desert in Wyoming? Is it, nature taking back landscape? Is it about something else? Is it about space? Is it about, right, something else? So tell me what it's about. What's your concept? Make it really clean and simple. A half a page artist statement is enough. You don't need to make it bigger, right? And it doesn't need to have a lot of philosophy, and if you're using words like simulacra, you probably shouldn't, right? You're getting way off. I don't think you need it. You just need to tell us what it's about. Because again, it's about the work. If the work is solid, then I'm going to read the artist statement, right? But if the work doesn't hold up, I'm not getting that far. It's really important. If you've had any press, maybe you can put samples of the press that you've had in your packet, right? And you can mail that. Now, if your work is about environmental space and organics, recycling and sustainability, don't put it in a shiny, glossy black folder or a plastic bag. You know what I mean? Like your packaging should reflect, everything you make should reflect what your work is about and what you're about. So if you make a promo, you make a business card, it should reflect your work. If maybe it has a blue font or green font, maybe it's recycled paper, maybe every touch, everything that I do should support your imagery and your concept and you and what you represent and what your work represents. That's really important. You don't want to subvert yourself, right? A lot of this talk is about not doing things that'll get in the way of your being successful, right? Because that's the problem. A lot of people do things that get in the way of their being successful. So, the packet. A lot of galleries say that they won't accept submissions, right? Just forget about that. Send it in. They want to limit the amount of submissions they get, and I think that makes sense. Send a postcard, send a packet. I think what you should all do is put together a promotional packet, and you should all go to like 5 galleries in Chelsea. And you know that girl with the black hair that's pulled back really tight and the black turtleneck who's scared? She's scary, right? But if you go together, it's not so bad. And you go in. It's true. She's scary, right? She scares you. Yeah. So you walk in and she's mean sometimes. I don't know why, but she's mean. So, no, she doesn't smile. She just looks at you. Right? Yeah. And she shakes her head and goes back like, I don't even know why you're standing at this place. So walk up, take your package, put it on the counter, right? That little, right? I say, excuse me, sir, what's that? And so I'm leaving this for you. And they said, excuse me, sir, we don't take submissions. I want you to slowly turn around and walk away. Excuse me, sir, I don't know. It's like a bomb. It's sitting there, right? She's got to do something with it. So what's going to happen? That packet costs you $1.50. They're either going to throw it away or they're going to be like, oh, they're going to look at it, which is all you want, right? So have them open it up, send it in the mail. They're going to look at it, right? It's worth the $1.50. Take the chance, do these things. If you want a career, you're going to do them. You have to do them, right? Because if you only send to the galleries that take submissions, you're never going to end up in the places you want to be, right? So take risks. Put together a nice packet. Portfolio drop-offs. People, don't go into a gallery. This has happened. People come in the gallery, and artists are very knowledgeable sometimes about art, and they would look at the art, and we'd talk, and we'd be having a conversation, and I'd spend 40 minutes thinking we have a sale, and then the person would turn and go, oh, by the way, I'm an artist. I'd love to show you my work. I'm like, oh, you just took 40 minutes of my time. The other half is when I worked at the gallery, if I was there myself, and I was on the laptop, I was on the computer writing, I was working. Didn't look like it, but I was working, right? Because the opening, we have sales at the opening, we have sales at the exhibition, but it's kind of like a showroom. Most of my sales for most of my artists took place after the exhibition closed. People see it, and then they're like, oh, I have a client in 2 months. It's going to need a new boardroom. I'll be back. Or, oh my gosh, remember that piece we saw at Thomas Gallery? That would look great here. We should go back, right? So a lot of the sell-through is after the fact. which is why your contract, a gallery contract that we would have, would stipulate, my contract was for the New York metropolitan area and surrounding area. If the gallery I was with in LA had Mexico to San Francisco to Nevada, and they were so amazing they could have done more. If anybody offers you a contract for the continental United States, unless they're famous, don't ever sign it, because they're nuts. It's so hard to sell across the entire country, it just doesn't work. If somebody wants worldwide rights to your work, don't do it. If they want any kind of ownership rights to your work, don't do it. Just don't sign those contracts. It should be regional. It should apply to wherever you're going to sell. So we had a contract that was a 1-year renewable, unless either person in writing submitted they wanted to leave the contract, right? So I had to give 30 days. 30 days, you're going to leave the contract. I asked for a 6-month tail to sell the work after the end of the contract. Why? Because if you just had an exhibition and you leave, most of my sales are going to be 6 months in those next 6 months, right? So that's what I would ask for. I stated I would pay for the lighting, the space, the wine, certain amount of advertising, what you would pay for, you would pay for the shipping. We had that all stated in the gallery contract. I think it's important to get a gallery contract. A lot of people don't use them, but I think you should ask for one. You need to stipulate what your rights are. You need to be clear about your expenses up front so you don't end up paying more than you should. What else about gallery? I think that's it about gallery contracts. Something popped into my head. Okay, so you're going to go in, portfolio drop-offs. Portfolio drop-offs are great. Call ahead, ask if you can drop off a portfolio or some work, or if you can drop off a digital portfolio. I like to see prints. If your work is giant, bring me smaller samples and one giant print, so nobody's walking around with, this heavy box. You don't need to mat your work. You don't need to slip sheet your work, right? All you need to see are the prints. And you don't need a fancy portfolio. A black clamshell box is fine, right? Something you can get at Blick or one of those, or order online, an archival box, absolutely fine. Just make sure your name is in it and your contact information and a leave behind, a promotional piece, right? Because if I like it, I want to take your promotional work. I want to hold on to it. Sometimes people would bring their work in the gallery and I'd say, can I keep a couple pieces in the flat file? So that was a problem for some and not for others. But if I had a client coming in, I'd want to show them the work and see what they thought, right? So I'd keep some pieces in the flat file. We had one girl who brought in paintings. I put 3 of them out on top of the flat file. She left. By the time she came back to get them in the afternoon, we'd sold all 3. So we gave her a solo show like that, right? It was great. We each made a few $1,000s and everybody was happy. People liked the work, the response was positive. So sometimes I'll ask you to leave the work. Be aware that's going to happen. When you take your portfolio in, everything needs to be immaculate. No dinged corners, no dirt, no anything else. Why? Because if you have a dinged corner or a little dirt and you tell me that when we have the exhibition it's not going to be like that, it's not true. However you present yourself to me is exactly what our working relationship is going to be like. Exactly. I don't care how much you promise. There was a woman who had press this thick, but she'd Xeroxed them all cattywampus and made notations in pencil and clipped them together with one of those black clips. Great, I respected her press, but I knew that working with her was going to be like that kind of mangled mass of unfollowable stuff. Clean and simple, make it easy. Again, don't give people reasons not to work with you. Everything you do. So your portfolio has to be immaculate. If a print gets damaged, you need to remake it. I'm sorry. You have to. Sometimes when prints get to galleries, they get dinged, right? A corner gets dinged, a portfolio gets moved, it hits the corner a little bit something. Some people aren't very nice. I mean, not my fine art portfolio, but my commercial portfolio would come back with coffee rings on it sometimes. It just like breaks your heart, but what are you going to do, right? You're going to ask, Condé Nast to pay a new portfolio? You don't, right? So make sure everything's immaculate because that's how it is. When you go in to meet somebody, you don't need to be in a suit, but you need to be professional. You need to be put together. If you walk in and your hair's sticking up on one side and you look like you woke up and you think that makes you an artist, great. But that's exactly what it's going to be like to work with you, and I don't want it. There are enough issues, right? So just be presentable, be professional. It's everything your mom told you you should do, right? Right? Comb your hair, dress nice, be nice to the person, right? Present yourself well. That's this whole talk. I should rename it, like things your mom said that you don't do. But I think it's important. I think it's really important. So how you present yourself matters. Drop off a portfolio. It can take a couple days. It can take a couple weeks. It can take a month. It depends. And the larger the gallery, the longer it takes. So you need to be patient. The good thing is, generally, the longer somebody keeps your portfolio, the more interested they are in it. You can call back and check, but don't call back and check every day, right? Because just don't. I'm not going to talk to you, right? It's like the computer. It's like when you get that email, I really like your work, just back away from the computer, right? When you're like, oh my gosh, I can't, like, here's a great way to put it. If I have 11 shows a year, that's 11 things in 1 year. For you, that's 365 days of torture, right? For me, that's 11, right? 2 months is 2 shows. 2 months is 60 days of wondering why I haven't gotten back to you. It's the same thing in the commercial world, right? You just need to remember there's a little different perspective. So you need to be patient even when you get frustrated, right? I'm not saying don't follow up. I'm not saying the gallerist needs to be professional too. But just remember there's a different time valuation there, and I know it's really hard. So you're going to take photos in. I want to talk about signing photos. Okay, well let's back up. In your packet, you're going to make a list of the photos that you gave people, right? And on that list, it should have the name of the photo, the year it was made, the year it was taken. If you want, you can put the year it was printed. Some people like to buy prints that were made closer to the year that it was made. But the year that it was taken, the edition number, edition of 10, number 2 of 10, whatever. The material, the size of the prints, right? 20 by 24, 16 by 20, edition of 10 and 16 by 20, or an edition of 10 and these 3 sizes. I want to know the size. I want to know the material. What is it printed on? And what is it printed with? Right? Is it a digital C print? Is it a pigment print? Is it a carbon print? What is it? Is it a platinum print? Right? So I want to know what the material is because I need to visualize that. And if you tell me, 90% of the time I understand what that print looks like in that scale without having to see it right away, right? So I want all those things. You're going to make a list of that, right? So if you send me JPEGs or you give me a thumb drive with a bunch of stuff on it, there better be your CV, your artist statement, and a list of each of those images and all of that information for each one, right? Because as I go through those images, I need to know. Now, as you edit that portfolio that you're going to give people, remember, we do this. First, we put in one photo that we love that we know shouldn't be in that series. Right? Look at you like, oh, busted. There's some shame there. It's great. You're even blushing. Like, oh, man. But it's true. The problem is that one photo subverts the rest of the portfolio, right? Because I don't know if I'm going to get those 19 or that one. And maybe we had a really great day, and maybe I love the person in the print, or maybe it's just my personal favorite, but it shouldn't be in the portfolio, right? Edit it down. It's better to have 15 strong images than 20 images that aren't as good, because I'm going to imagine that if you have more, they're going to be the weakest images in that batch, right? And the other thing I'm going to do is if I open up a folder full of images, I'm old school. I'm going to lasso 20 of them. I'm not going to open with Lightroom or I'm just going to, select 5 of them and open them up. Because if those 5 aren't good, the other 20 aren't going to be good, right? I should be able to select any 5 in there or any 10 and open them up, and I have an idea of what your body of work is about, the strength of that work, and what your voice is. If that's not the case, you're not editing correctly, right? You need to edit tight. It has to be a visual style, a single visual style, not the same image over and over, but a certain style so I can identify the photographer. It needs to have a concept, right? And a theme, so I understand what the concept is. Visually, it needs to flow together. Conceptually, it needs to flow together. If it doesn't, it's not a consistent body of work. It's not, for me, an exhibitable body of work. So you need to be aware when you edit. Right? Edit it tightly. Don't show more than 20. I don't think you ever need to show more than 20. If you have 40 or 50, don't show them all. If I like those 20, I'm going to ask you for more, always. Because I want to know you have more. If you only have 20, show me 15. Because I want to ask you for more. What else do you have? You can't give me, I would exhibit between 20 and 22 images, photographs generally. If you're giving me the 20 that I have to show, that's not going to work. Because you don't understand how my space works, right? I had a little nook on one side, and I had the flat files, and it was behind the desk. And when you walk into a space, everybody wants a space by the door, which is crazy. The space you want, if that's our door, you want this space right here. Because if I walk to the door of a gallery and look in, I'm not looking around the corner. I'm looking at the stuff over here to see if I want to come in, right? If that's the door, maybe here, but you probably want to be here, right? So think about that as you begin to place your work in galleries, and think about how galleries need to lay out the exhibition. It isn't linear like you imagine. I had to think of, well, if somebody's coming down the hallway this way or this way, what are they going to see and what's next to it? And does that complement that color across the room? And is there a dialogue across the room, not just around the room, right? There had to be a conceptual and a visual dialogue around the room. It had to hold together. It had to be tight. And the line of sight through the door had to be what brought people in. If it didn't, we weren't going to have anybody come in the room, right? So as you exhibit, as you edit, you need to begin to consider those things. It's really important. So signing photos. You're going to sign contemporary imagery, right? If you're going to show in a contemporary conceptual space on the back or the verso, upper left or lower right-hand corner, you're going to have your name, right? Printed. You're going to have the same thing, name of the print, the year it was made, the edition size. You don't need to put the material because I have it. And then you can, I always put the copyright. I suggest my artists put copyright. Why do you put copyright? A lot of galleries hate that. But let's face it, if you're the artist and you're making your work and somebody buys that print and they imagine, because they bought the print, they have the right to reproduce it or put it in a book or put it somewhere else, that's wrong, right? They don't have the right to do that. So if you put copyright, they don't. I put copyrights on all my invoices because I think whenever you do a delivery notice or something else, you need to put copyright. And if you state that, then if somebody uses it, it's knowledgeable infringement. It is an accidental infringement. So, and then you sign it, right? Here. You want to sign it with a Sigma micron pen. A Sigma micron pen is not like it's like a Sharpie, but actually it's archival, more archival than a Sharpie, so it won't ever bleed through or damage your print. If you're signing a black and white, you can also sign it in a number 2 pencil. That works as well. If you sign your prints on the front, that's fine. My friend at the art fair always did. Certain galleries will want to see your name or the title of the piece, your signature on the front. But remember, in a conceptual gallery, that becomes a reference to a different era, right? Signing on the front and putting the title of the piece, the edition number on the front, is a reference to a certain era of photography. Now, there are some people who want to see the print and they want to see your signature. That's great. I always say, if you sign the mat, people can take off the mat and you lose the print, you lose the signature. If you want to sign the print, sign it under the image area. Don't sign on the image area, right? And then somebody can mat it and cover it, or they can not mat it and not cover it, whatever they want, right? If you feel the need to sign it on the front. But remember, if you're working in a conceptual space, that needs to work with the idea of your photograph. It needs to work with the concept of the piece in the context of a contemporary art gallery. Make sense? A little bit, right? Okay, we're getting there. Couple other things. Corporate sales. Everybody wants to sell to hotels. They're amazing. It's 100 rooms. The problem is, I don't know, hotels pay so very little. They pay like a couple bucks a print. I had somebody offer me, they wanted large prints that they were going to pay me a lot for, but then they wanted small prints and they wanted them delivered framed. And I was going to make, they wanted like 1,000 of them, but I was going to make like $1 or something on each one. It wasn't worth the effort. I mean, $1,000 would be great, but I'm not going to give away my work and unedition it and go to all this trouble and probably lose money for just a couple bucks, right? Where you do make money in like hotels and places is in the lobby area, right? Lobby, people pay a lot of money for work for lobby. They'll pay it for restaurants. I sold a bunch of work to high-end Marriotts who wanted nice original artwork in their restaurants. They're willing to pay a couple grand a pop for that artwork. It's amazing. Corporations want, they need to fill wall space, right? So we did the Swiss Re collection up on, it's the top 6 floors of the Helmsley building, right? And we did Bank of America, one part of Bank of America. So what they wanted was a bunch of different work. Now I should say, a certain amount of the art collection is the collection, but some of it is what the executives like. So we had some guys who wanted baseball. Do you have any baseball? I'm like, I don't know, where am I going to get amazing baseball? So the woman I was working with was here visiting from LA, and she went to the Met one day, and she found a guy with a table outside of the Met with a bunch of baseball pictures, Yankee Stadium and stuff. And she said, I'll give you $100 a piece. Can you have 20 of them here tomorrow? And he's like, yeah. And she's like, great. And she went and picked them up, and we had like 20 baseball prints for these guys who wanted baseball. It was amazing. But we didn't know where to find them. One guy wanted ships. We found a Robert Maple. Do you know Robert Mapplethorpe photographed a battleship once? I don't know, and that's what we got the guy. We found a Robert Mapplethorpe battleship. Okay, so There's a variety of work. My point is, if you're going to do corporate sales, they take a variety of work. No politics, no religion, no nudity, right? People get sued for that stuff. Nobody wants, I mean, it seems lately everybody wants to debate all that. But you can't have that in the workplace because it makes you liable, right? So no politics, no religion, no nudity. 16 by 20 is, I think, the small size most corporations will buy. Why? Because I need to fill the hallway. So I'll buy prints for like $800 a piece to put in the hallway, 16 by 20, 20 by 24. They're matted, right? Maybe $1,000, $1,200 hallway. Lower level people's offices. You get to the higher level people, you're talking $1,000, a couple grand a print, right? Because we can make them bigger. When you get to the CEO, CFO, or the lobby, sky's the limit. 10, 20, 50, $100,000 depending on the piece. So if you make lobby-sized work, if you can make giant pieces, we had a guy for the Helmsley building thing. He took a photo and then projected it and sketched it in carbon on a big gorgeous piece of paper, and we framed it, and the people who own the space are so happy, right? So local companies love pictures of their local area. New Yorkers love pictures of New York, right? If I have an accounting firm or a law firm and I have a great picture of the Brooklyn Bridge or whatever, that's great. You can't take pictures of the Chrysler Building, Rockefeller Center, and those places and just sell prints of that. They can be in the skyline, but many of the buildings, particularly those owned by Tishman Speyer, are registered, they're owned, they're trademarked. So the Chrysler Building's trademarked, you need permission, right? The Hollywood sign is trademarked, by the way. If you want to sell posters of the Hollywood sign, Hollywood gets 10% of every sale. If you want to sell prints, Hollywood gets 10% of every sale. Certain things are trademarked. That's all because people own it. Okay, corporations. So corporate sales are great. You should contact corporations. There are places like Progressive Insurance, Estee Lauder, Bank of America. They have huge corporate art collections. You want to contact the corporate art buyer or the corporate art buying committee, which is a nightmare because it's like 8 people all trying to decide what's good. They all come into your gallery the first time happy because they're selecting art. Then they come back a month and a half later not liking each other at all because they've been arguing for a month and a half. And then, or sometimes it's the director of facilities. The same person who's managing the pipes and the carpet is choosing the artwork. It's just the way it is. There are corporate art buyers, independent corporate art buyers that you can get in touch with. There's a woman who sells a list of those. It's not up to date. And I bought it years ago, and I called her and told her, first she sells it out of Florida but lives in Toronto. And then she said, I said, it's not up to date. And she said, I know, but can you send me any updates? Because I could really use that. Like, no, I'm not. You should give me my money. So she had no shame. So anyway, look them up. You can find them online, corporate art buyers. There are some really amazing ones around. They'll take your work, they'll take it in corporations, and they'll show it. Interior designers will take that work. If it's a corporate buyer or an interior designer, they expect a 10 or 20% discount. That's how they make their money. So if it's a $1,000 print, they get it for $800. They sell it for the $1,000 list, and they make $200 a print. Make sense? So if somebody came in the gallery and it was 10%, 5 off of me, 5 off of you. It's 20%, it's 10 off of you and 10 off of me, right? It's just fair. We would split that discount. Because if somebody, interior designer or a corporate buyer likes your work, it's a consistent sale. It's what you really want. You love it. It's a beautiful thing to have happen. Grants, really quickly. Grants are an amazing thing. People will pay you to do the work you do. And I'm gonna make this part really short because this is a whole nother lecture. But if I want an exhibition and a book, nobody's going to give me a grant to do that. I want to go to the Amazon, take pictures, and make a book and an exhibition. I want you to give me money for that. Like, why? I want to go to the Amazon and I want to photograph the effects of climate change on indigenous tribes in the Amazon basin. I'm going to come back, I'm going to make a website, I'm going to do a little educational program, I'm going to partner with a scientist, and we're going to do an exhibition and a book as part of that. Will you fund that? Yeah, of course. You see the difference? Everybody gets angry. Why won't you make my book? Why won't you fund my book? Why won't you fund my exhibition? Well, no, I'm going to fund your idea that helps me meet the mission of my foundation. Foundations, the Foundation Center is right up here on 5th Avenue, 70 or 72 5th Avenue, 2nd floor. It's the largest foundation repository place you can go to learn about grants to do your work. Go there. University of Michigan or Michigan State has a great list of foundations and places you can get grant funded. It's a beautiful thing. I get grant funded pretty much every year, at least once. It's a beautiful thing that people pay you to do what you love and pay you to travel to do it. but you need to meet their mission. You can't just have people pay you to take pictures. What you do has to meet their mission. Their goal is a foundation, okay? Releases. Releases are really important. And then I'm going to wrap it up and take questions. Releases. So, do you need a release as a fine artist? No. Legally, are you protected? Yes. Right? Does that mean you cannot be sued? No, of course. People can sue you for anything, right? So, two examples. One, I'm going to show the seedy underworld of suburbia. My Uncle John, he's having some beer, we're talking. I said, John, this is amazing. Let me take pictures of you in the recliner watching TV. He's like, yeah. And he's in his underwear. He's like, yeah, I love this. You love me. I love you. Yeah. We're taking pictures. It's a great time, right? You have an exhibition. The prints are up on the wall. They're selling for $1,500 a piece. John comes in. He goes, oh, my God, I can't believe you're making $1,500 a print on me. I want a part of this, right? He needs a car. He'd like some. I can't believe you're taking advantage. Look at that, right? The other example is, you wake up in the morning, your partner's laying next to you, you're in love, the light's coming through the window, you've never seen anything more beautiful. You pull out your camera, you start taking pictures. Oh my God, we need to share our love with the world. I want to take pictures. Yes, photograph me. Yes, you take these pictures, you do these beautiful series of images. They're nudes, you happen to put them up. You walk into a gallery, then, you plan the gallery, you plan the exhibition, you make the prints, and then you split up. Now, the problem is that few people hate you more than the person who used to love you. So they walk into that exhibition like, oh my God, I can't believe you're showing me to the entire world and all our friends. I'm going to sue you. I can't believe this. You've ruined my life. Get the release when you're having beer or in love, right? Get the release, really. Get the release at the time you take the pictures. You have to. You won't get it after the fact. If somebody says yes to you photographing them, get the release. And there's this thing called a pocket release. I don't understand it. It's like a half a release on a half a page of paper. How is that protection? It's like half a condom, right? It just doesn't work. Like, you need to get a full release. People will sign it. You have the right to use this picture for perpetuity. Give them $10. I gave you $10. If you're going to give them a print, plus one 11 by 14 print, color print, black and white print, plus 10 digital files at 72, spell out exactly what you're giving that person. Have them put their initials on what you're giving them. Have them sign it and take a picture of them holding it. I kid you not. I can't tell you, because it's lawsuit protection. Take a picture of the person holding it. Really quickly, Philip LaCourse de Crescia, he put his camera, do you know this story? He put his camera on scaffolding on the street, took pictures of people on the street, triggered, they'd walk by. There's a picture of a Hasidic gentleman. He saw the pictures in the gallery. They were selling for $25,000 a piece. He wanted to sue. He felt he was being taken advantage of. If you get sued like that, it's 2 or 3 years of your life, a lot of time, a lot of money. I've had friends who've been put out of business by lawsuits because they can't afford it, right? You don't want to spend 2 or 3 years fighting a lawsuit with somebody because they feel they've been wronged, right? So did Philip have the right to use that picture because it was in a public space and the rest of the context? Yes. Did he have the money to fight that? Yes. Did the gallery that he worked for fight it? Yes. Did they have a financial investment? Sure. They were selling editions of 10 for $25,000 and they'd supported his whole career. They fought that lawsuit. They can. You can't. Get a release, right? You don't want to be involved in a lawsuit. It's just not worth it. So if you're doing street photography, do you need to walk up to everybody on the street? No. But there was a guy who photographed a girl in a beer garden in Estonia, and then he sold the photo to Monty Python when Monty Python was on Broadway, and they had a big picture of this girl coming out of the windows. She visited New York. She saw it, and it was her, and she proved it was her. And she sued, and the picture was taken down, and she got a lot of money from people. Don't count on it being on the other side of the world. Social media, other media, right? You need to have social media, and I'll make this quick. This will wrap up with it. You have to have a social media because every editor, every gallerist I know looks on social media. Your Facebook page is yours. Your professional Facebook page should be professional. Your Instagram, if you want to have one where you're doing whatever, fine. But you need to have a professional page as well, right? A place where people can go and see your work. If you have an exhibition, you announce it there. The beautiful thing about like Facebook or Instagram is if you like my page, I feel I would never email people and say I have an exhibition because I feel like I'm intruding. But if you like my page, I'm going to say I'm going to be at the B&H event space speaking. I have an exhibition coming up. I have a talk coming up here. Hey, look, here's my new work, right? You've said you want to know what I'm doing, so I'm gonna let you know, right? It's a different relationship. And I have to say, the best example is, I do a lot of work in Russia. I'm there about 60 days a year. I used to be there about 120 days a year. So I travel, I curate a lot. I've curated exhibitions at the Hermitage Museum. The last 7 years, I do a lot of curation. So I was there, and I was at Photo Plus, so it's great. I'm in New York, you guys understand. I was at Photo Plus at the Javits Center, coming down the escalator, and there was an editor coming up, and he's like, hey, Thomas, like, hey, how are you? Like, fine, how are you? And he's like, I'm good. He said, hey, love that work in Russia. I said, how did you know what I was doing in Russia? He said, saw it online. And I said, I've never seen you online. He goes, no, I just look, right? He never liked anything. I never saw his name. I didn't know he had a page, but he looks, right? Made a difference. That's open doors for me. All I can do is give you my personal experience there. I had students drag me onto Facebook. I had students drag me on Instagram. I was like, really? You know, what am I going to show? And I don't show many pictures of myself because, you know, I'm not that interesting. I don't think I'm that interesting. But I'll show you what I'm doing and it's really made a difference. It also makes a difference to the people you work with. It just does. It's just where we're at. So if you want gallerists and people to see your work, if your work is out there, they can find it. If your work isn't out there, they can't find it. Right? And that now in this world is a way that people find it. Don't put all your good pictures, don't put your entire series, watermark them if you wish, right? But you need to be visible, you need to be public. That needs to be part of your marketing at this point. It's just the world that we're in. I know I've been talking for a long time. It looks like it's been about an hour and 45 minutes. Thank you all for being here, for being patient. It's a lot of information. I hope it's useful.